All right. Welcome everybody to the Tao De Jing. Eventful start to this with a with earthquake in Taiwan. Uh, temporarily, Jason had to take cover, so he's not going to be joining us. He might join us later on when everything is safe. But we're going to start off with Tao De Jing with number 62 and 63. The format, we would love to hear you read your favorite translations of 62. And then Amon is going to share the Amon and Jason Amon translation. And then we'll have a general discussion. And then we'll go forward. We're going to start with Kwan, followed by Jyoti. Kwan, go ahead.
Okay, first, a word that is quite rare that I want to explain first. Midden, M-I-D-D-E-N, it means a pint of waste of a dunghill. So translation by Professor Roberts, stanza 62. Midden for the myriad, the way is sacred to men of merit, and a safeguard to all who do wrong. Fine words may buy high station, fine deeds win man's acclaim. But why turn from those who do wrong? For when the Son of Heaven is enthroned, and his three-ended statesmen are installed, better to counsel them in the way than ride an envoy's four-horse coach, heralded by the jadis of state. Why did man of old honor the way? Has it not been said, through the way shall right be found, wrongdoers spared? For this the world honors the way.
Thank you, Kwan. Next up is going to be Jyoti. Anybody else wants to read? Go ahead and type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom. Jyoti.
Okay, chapter 62 by Jia Fu Feng. Tao is source of the 10,000 things. It is the treasure of the good man and the refuge of the bad. Sweet words can buy honor. Good deeds can gain respect. If a man is bad, do not abandon him. Therefore, on the day the emperor is crowned, or the three officers of state installed, do not send a gift of jade and a team of 4 horses, but remain still and offer Tao. Why does everyone like the Tao so much at first? Isn't it because you find what you seek and are forgiven for what you sin when you sin? Therefore, this is the greatest treasure of the universe. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti. All right, if there is nobody else, we will go to the translation by Jason and Amon. Amon, go ahead.
Amon, I'll let you share your screen, in case I have to interrupt you.
That's a good idea.
There we go. Sorry about that. Everyone see it all right?
Yep.
Excellent. Chapter 62, the Sanctuary Tao. Tao is the sanctuary of all things. It is a jewel for good people. It is a refuge for bad people. Moral words can gain respect. Moral deeds can win admiration of people. But why are bad people abandoned? The position of the emperor and 3 chief ministers are created for this reason. Instead of practicing elaborate rituals by using discs of jade or carts with 4 horses, they, the emperor, the chief ministers, would do better just resting and advocating this Tao. Why was this Tao valued in ancient times? It is not because it gives what you have asked for and forgives what you have wronged. So it is valued by the world.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, yeah. Okay, so here there's something I may do different than a lot of translator is here on the moral word and the moral deed. And I think a lot of because the Chinese word here, they use 美言, okay, so usually means beautiful. But I think this one 美 in Taoism, in this text, in Dao De Jing, I think it means moral, 美 means good, and which means moral good. So I take a step to translate as moral word. One of the reasons is if you go back to chapter 2. Chapter 2 is talking about the he used the chapter 2 use 美 as a good, and the reverse is 恶. 恶 means evil. So you can see if you do beautiful and evil, so that beautiful must be moral good, moral beautiful. That's the reason I translate as moral words and moral deed. And then the words may be a little bit different because you may hear other translation to as the, can you move down a little bit, Amang? No, the other way. Okay, here, when we talk about the 美言可以, sometimes they put this character 尊 as the the last word, okay, to the put this word 尊 to replace 美, okay, become 尊行. So that's why sometimes you see people translate as a noble act because the words have been put in a different place. So that's why you may see different interpretation or different translation because it depends on how you read the word. So I think that makes sense is to this way because it match. It talk about the moral word can gain respect. Moral deed can win people, or you can win people's admiration. But here is not suggest or encourage people to do moral good because later on he talk about, I still read this one is anti-Confucianism, anti-ritual reading, because in this part talk about the position of emperor and the three chief minister or three duke are created. So the purpose of the chief minister, the purpose of emperor is not doing the, here he talk about using disc of jade and the carts with 4 horses. And I don't see here he is talking about a luxury life. He's talking about the ritual for the emperor and the duke because they have the certain ritual for the emperor and for the chief minister. So Laozi here is talking about you don't have to do this, right? Why was Tao value? It's better to just resting and advocating Tao. So instead of doing ritual, you should doing Tao, so-called 无为, non-action. And in this way, the person, remember, Taoism is not a moral philosophy. The idea is a moral. So there's no good, no bad. So you will give what you have asked and forgive you have wrong. So basics is a moral. So basically that's the teaching for the political teaching because you should stay away from moral. So therefore, the good people and the bad people, they all can live together. So that's what I read in this chapter. Yeah, thank you, Amma.
Jason, my hat's off to you for your commitment to this. I didn't know if you'd have any want of offering comment, and thank you. I always appreciate it. You can highlight your copy of the translation. It'll show up as a highlight on the shared screen, by the way.
Oh, yeah.
And Yeah, Jason, I really do appreciate this translation. This is one where I can get kind of scholarly in the weeds and start talking about some of the anachronisms. There were edits made to the text by the time of the Han Dynasty. So these three chief ministers, San Jing, were originally San Gong, three dukes. They turned it into ministers in later time because it was a more elevated position by the time of the Han Dynasty. So the received text that has come down through most of history has had this as ministers, but the oldest version refers to them as three dukes. And this issue of discs of jade and carts with four horses, anyone who attended the Analects encountered Confucius' absolute anathema that these upstart nobles who were not entitled to do these elaborate rituals with, what was it, 8x8 rows of horses, or 9x9. I can't remember, but the ritual was paramount to him. That is the function, that was the duty of the empirical house. It shouldn't be it shouldn't be anyone else's right to assume they can do likewise. Here, Lao Tzu is saying this kind of pomp and circumstance is just not what counts. It's not what they should be doing at all. If anything, they should sit down, shut up, and advocate for the way things are, the Tao. The Tao, that last bit, Tao, was also an anachronism added later for people who weren't getting it. The older version just says they would be better sitting and advocating this. Full stop. So it didn't necessarily say the Tao, but they made that clear in the Han Dynasty because, again, interesting little edits over history. And why is this important? It's important because, as was said much earlier, the Tao treats people like straw dogs. They're not good, they're not bad, it is indifferent to who and what they are. It will give water, give sunlight to the good, the bad, the ugly, and any other, Western you care to mention alike. And so that is why it's so valuable. That is why it's worth advocating for. And that's the advocacy that they should be espousing to their followers. Yeah, 62 is a interesting little chapter with all kinds of idiosyncrasies, but it's one I do think captures a lot of the quintessential messages of the Tao Te Ching.
Thank you, Amon, and thank you, Jason. All right, folks. So if you'd like to comment, or everybody who wants to comment, go ahead and type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom. We're going to start with Quan. Quan, go ahead.
Stanza 62 is truly marvelous because I'm torn between an unbounded admiration and a cosmic laughter. Okay, so because the unbounded admiration, of course, is for the fact that it is a deep invitation for brotherhood among men, and that what is beautiful here, of course, is an invitation to the fact that the good, the bad, the beautiful, the ugly, etc., they are all accepted by the way, of course. Okay, and that is the absolute beauty that cannot be, that is unsurpassable, of course. And the French people have an expression, le grand soir, okay, the great evening. That expression means that kumbaya. I think that the American expression for le grand soir is kumbaya. And no one can be against kumbaya. Confucianism, which I am a humble promoter, is a lower human attempt for peace and harmony with the rules and order rather than for kumbaya, because I would give, of course, the Confucianist perspective, because for that grand soir or for that kumbaya to happen, it means that practically everyone, or I would be more reasonable. I don't think that we need 100% of mankind to be in infinite awareness to have kumbaya. Let's say that we need at least 35% of mankind to be in infinite awareness to get kumbaya. Okay, those 35% of the upper stratum, and the way I speak is very Confucianist. Okay, of the upper stratum, even with infinite awareness, that would be the leaders and that would create the environment for kumbaya. But well, no one can be against kumbaya, but Confucianism precisely. And you know that Confucius, according to tradition, met Laozi, and when he talked to his disciple, he said, "Wow, I just met Laozi. That old guy is a dragon. I'm not capable to be at his level. I can only be what I am. I would try to suggest some very down to earth and some very precise rules to organize a society, but definitely that guy, I'm not in the same league than that guy." Okay, so in the Chinese tradition, it is very clear that Laozi is superior to Confucius, but at the same time, he suggests something that is not. And when I say that, it's not. It's not. I'm not mocking. Okay, I think that Confucius truly admire Laozi, but at the same time, he feels that he's not capable to implement such a stuff. So he implemented what he was capable, and that is known as Confucianism nowadays, and which means that you have to separate the worthy from the unworthy, the capable from the incapable, the professional from the unprofessional, and that you have rules, etiquette, and so on. Waiting for the day that at least 35% of us would be in infinite awareness, and according to my Confucianist way of speaking, that this upper stratum 35% would create something brilliant to create the kumbaya or le grand soir, as a Frenchman say. I stop here.
Thank you, Quan. Next up is going to be Madeline, followed by Mark. Madeline.
Thanks, Shrikant. I have a question. It's about the translation decisions. I was wondering why you went with the later versions, like the ministers instead of the dukes, and also why you went with the inserted word Tao when it hadn't been there before.
Okay, Madeline, you talk about first, 62, right? You talk about the chief minister. Okay, actually, if I do word-to-word translation, I probably should do 3 duke. Okay, but I think during that time is I just try to avoid to become a later time. I'm not sure during that time. Kwang probably know. During that time, they have the 3 in the Chunqiu. They have the San Gong. I'm not sure. They have this position.
They
You
have the
have a good answer?
Tasu Tu and so on, and the Su Kong and so on. But they didn't have the San Kong. San Kong was really a Han Imperial.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So it could be this. That's why I read this one could be the later people added later. Okay, it's another earthquake. Yeah, it's another earthquake. The aftershock is too small to run. So so 我知道，没关系，这个还很小。Yeah, so it's too small to take care of. So, but anyway, Taoism is more important. So, so that's why I think the San Gong is the later name. That's why I translate the 3 minutes to answer Madeline's question. Okay, so that's one of the reasons. And what's your another question, Madeline?
Yeah, so my question really was why you went with the later version of the text, the ministers, and also the insertion of the word resting and advocating in the Tao, when apparently that
Oh,
hadn't been
okay.
in the earlier version. So like why you wouldn't use dukes instead of ministers, and also why you wouldn't omit the term, resting and advocating in the Tao.
The emperor and the chief minister will do better just resting, 坐,
Yeah.
okay, because the word 坐进此道, 坐 means sit, okay, so I translate as resting, okay. Actually, I should, if you do word by word, it could be sitting, okay. Sitting could be also make sense if I use sitting, because that's Chinese word 坐 means sit, okay. So, that's the reason I use resting. I could use sitting. Sitting may not be the bad word, So do I answer the question?
I'll try and help out a little bit here, because I think I get what Madeline's driving at. Most of the Chinese text that we're using for translating is the most received text. It's the one that has proliferated throughout Chinese history. The only reason we know of an older text is because it was found centuries later, and in finding out that there were some of these edits made. Even though there were edits made, couple hundred years supposedly after Laozi wrote it, those edits became sort of rote. They are the understood and received Dao De Jing. If we were to stick with that original sort of that original ancient text, the Mao Dong, then we would actually have to be doing a lot of different edits, and that text is incomplete in a lot of ways. And so it's actually better to use the received text.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Sorry, I forget myself. This is a weird night. Mark, you had a question next.
Yeah, thanks. I think you and Quan kind of answered my question in the chat, but I'll expand it a little bit and see if you guys want to make some comments on it. And it's kind of related to what you just said about the difference between the received text and some of the earlier ones. Is I'm kind of interested in the difference between the ideological and social conditions that gave rise to the Tao Te Ching in its origin, and then the way that it may have been modified or interpreted later for the convenience of institutions or rulers that might have had a different take on like how to promote it. So, for example, the story that I think it was Quan that was mentioning, the story of the meeting between Confucius and Lao Tzu, I'm suspicious that this is a fabrication, is not a real event. And there's a lot of things like that about the Tao Te Ching that are kind of shrouded in mystery. My impression is you can't really know one way or the other. But it's interesting to think about it from the standpoint of like how probable is it versus why would somebody make this story up, or what social function could it serve, you know. So kind of that's my overall question about the relationship between the original Tao Te Ching, the historicity of it, and like the way that it's been kind of interpreted or reinterpreted later. That's it. Thank you.
That's a giant question to tackle, because it's kind of the zeitgeist of intellectual activity in China all the way up through the 19th century. Taoism and Confucianism in discourse with each other. I'm not going to say debate or argument. There's some friendly little jabs, and I think the tale of Confucius meeting Lao Tzu may have been a friendly little jab. It's arguable whether a Lao Tzu actually even existed. There is some evidence that it may have been a librarian named Li R, but who did some of the Tao Te Ching, but obviously there was not just one author to the Tao Te Ching. That's pretty well understood. And so how this developed over time was, I think, a little bit under duress and a little bit of secret glee of rude scholars who got to read it for the first time and just felt like it was a pressure release valve for the grueling, arduous, ongoing study that they were being told they must do, must do, must do. And so giving a little kudos here and there, but stick to the, the status quo. You will study your analytics, you will study, later the great learning, etc. I'll let Quan tackle this more if he wants. I'm emceeing while Shrikant's running away, so I'll try not to take advantage of that. And I'll hand it over to you, Quan.
Okay, so first I just want to say that the choice of translating for ministers is probably right because the received text first is very close to the copy of the Ma Wang Dui found in 168, well, found in 1973, but in a grave that has been closed in 168 BCE. And let's not forget that in 168 BCE, it was the Han Empire. Okay, so it's perfectly correct to translate administer or the three excellencies because that was their title at the time. That's for the small detail. For the big question, I think that once again, I want to come back to the image that I suggest for Chinese culture. Okay, a tree that the roots are the I Ching and the hexagram going back to prehistorical times and having been stabilized by the Zhou dynasty and the spring and autumn period, the warring state period, and consolidated in 136 BCE when Emperor Wu chose Confucianism as the state ideology, and in 124 BCE, 12 years later, with the creation of Taishui, the Imperial Academy. What I want to say with the creation of Taishui, the Imperial Academy in 124 BCE, is that everything in terms of culture that have been created in the former 2,000 years, okay, we start in 124 BCE, okay. If Chinese civilization need a year zero, that year would be 124 BCE because the Han Imperial Dynasty crystallized all the cultural legacy from the former 2,000 years, and they decided what is to be transmitted. So in that year 124 BCE, the Imperial Academy decided that there were some philosophy in the past that we tend to canonize and to put in what I would call the received version, precisely, the version that is considered as canonical, as classic. From there, let's not forget that the Tao Te Ching has been accepted by the imperial family. Okay, I remind everyone that the Han Dynasty started in 206 BCE, and from 206 BCE to 136 BCE, when Emperor Wu elevated Confucianism to the rank of imperial ideology, the Tao Te Ching was imperial ideology from 206 BCE to 136 BCE. So never think that the Tao Te Ching was an ordinary stuff for the peasant or for the beggars in the street, okay? It was stuff that was studied by the young aristocrats, by the nobility, and by the scholars at court. Because precisely the Tao Te Ching was more complex in terms of epistemology, that Confucianism has been chosen because it was a simpler framework for the imperial bureaucracy. It doesn't mean that the Tao Te Ching has been rejected after 136 BCE. On the contrary, because when you speak to a person having a classical Chinese education or a scholar of Eastern Asian studies, Taoism, there is a dimension of Taoism that is looked down upon, but it's not the Taoism of the Tao Te Ching, it's not the Taoism of Zhuangzi, it's not the Taoism of Laozi, okay? That kind of Taoism is considered as high Taoism, philosophical Taoism. And the little story of Confucius having met Laozi, I agree with Mark that it's possible that it's a fairy tale. But it's possible because Confucius was born in 551 BCE and Laozi was born like 25 years before. So it's possible that a 30 years old Confucius have met a 60 years old Laozi. Okay, it's possible, but it's not proven. That being said, what we read here was studied by the nobility and by the scholars at the 2,000 years ago. The Taoism that is looked down upon and still nowadays is the Taoism of superstitions, of popular ceremonies, of that kind of stuff. So once again, the tree of Chinese culture has as roots the I Ching, and the hexagram going back to prehistorical times. The trunk is made by Taoism, Confucianism, with legalism as a tool of Confucianism, and with many branches from Chinese authors and from foreign authors. Okay, so even if the story of the meeting between Confucius and Laozi is a fairy tale, it is true that the Chinese scholar considered the Taoist perspective, the philosophical Taoist perspective, is a superior one, but that is not open to everyone. Okay, so before the realization of paradise on earth, you need something in the middle that can manage the state. And that something in the middle for Chinese civilization is called Confucianism. I stop here.
Thank you, Quan. And I got to say, on behalf of Taoists, one little holy war insurrection, and they never lived it down. About a couple hundred years later, yeah, the Yellow Turban Rebellion, if anyone wants to do some Googling. But that's the only one they ever did. I digress. Nick, you're up next.
Yeah, thanks. Am I audible? Okay, great, thanks. But just want to contribute a footnote to this interesting question raised by Mark, the societal and cultural background when the two schools of thought developed. I fully agree with Huang, but I just want to add a twist to it. At the time of Laozi and Confucius, China was basically in chaos. So it was, total chaos, fighting wars, and the collapse of old system, etc., etc. So obviously there was a tremendous intellectual anxiety as to what to do to restore peace, etc., etc., and so on. Either the individual or the state could prosper or even to survive. So that was a general background. And here, of course, the question focuses on the two main schools of thought, but actually there are multiple schools of thought because different people offer different solutions, and some of them form into a school of thought. So the way I see it, and as we will read next verse, it's also illustrate the main difference of the Taoism and the Confucianism, even though they originated from the same root, is the emphasis on the real world solution to be proposed. So the best way is to illustrate by example instead of engaging in a empty theoretical discussion. The example that the later Taoist sage Zhuangzi used was very illustrative. Imagine in a dry land where it used to be river, two fishes surviving, and they were dying, but they were spitting on each other because that would give some moisture to each other, and that would hopefully prolong their life a little bit. Of course, fish do this out of their instinct, not because they think. So with that situation, what would you do as a human being if you come upon that scenario? Well, the Confucianism would say, okay, we ought to be benevolent. The big word benevolent. Let's fetch a bucket of water and put fish in it and make them survive, right? Because it's a very touching thing, scene. The Taoist would say, well, no, because that benevolence is manifested only because you have lost Tao. You have deviated from the Tao many years ago. So the river dried up. So you end up with a bad situation where you have to rescue the little beautiful fish out of your concern of benevolence. So only you show benevolence when you have lost the, and you lost the after you lost Tao. So the real solution is really to restore the Tao. If you have the Tao, you would never have the scenario that we come upon. So I think that's I understand the difference of the two schools of thought. Thank you.
I would add to that, a hungry Taoist would also think of fish dinner. Thank you, Nick. Madeline, you're up.
Yeah, odd that no one mentioned the option of spitting on the fish. I was wondering if you could put the reading back on the screen.
1 second. Can you see that?
Yes. Okay, so right up there in the first few lines are sanctuary, refuge, and jewel. And these were things that we also saw in the last few verses, didn't we? About withdrawing within, closing the gate, sitting inside your house quietly, not going out, closing the senses. So it seems to be a recurring theme, at least in this whatever sequence we're in right now.
Go ahead, Jason.
Let me answer this question. Okay, so I don't see that recurring scene on this one because because I based on Chinese word, probably English word will have the same meaning on that. So the word here is "ao." Okay, the words "ao," the first word. Okay, so that means I translate it as a sanctuary. Okay, that word means in the house, the master room. You can put in the master as a master. The very master room is very deep in the corner. Okay, so you think about it, that's the meaning. That's why I translate a sanctuary. Okay, and the words "bao." Okay, I think the only way to translate is treasure. And another word for the bad people is "bao," means protection. So one way to translate is refugee, or you put the protection. So I don't see that's the recurring theme. Okay, and when the previous section talk about the close the door, shut the mouth, is talking about, let's talk about epistemology. Okay, how do you know things? But here is talking about governing. Okay, so political. Okay, so in this sense, I don't see that's the recurrency. I hope my explanation makes some sense. So
Yes, thanks. It does. So sanctuary here would mean something like innermost room.
yeah, the literally the words means "ao." "Ao" means the deep room. So Chinese say "ao miao" means very deep mystery, right? A profound mystery. Use this out. So that means in deep in the room. So
Great. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you. Next up is going to be Joe. Joe, go ahead.
Okay, I just had a question. Did I hear correctly that the Tao is not intended to be moral?
Yeah, that's put this way. Okay, it's a moral teaching, but it's immoral. Okay, so beyond good and evil, that's put this way. Okay, so as a let me make, I know we have a lot of discussion about Taoism and the Confucianism. Okay, so my position is the big difference of Taoism and the Confucianism. We talk about the moral, but political philosophy, right? For Confucius, the leader must be moral, okay? And then the Confucian leader should want everybody be moral. So they have a moral judgment, everybody do moral. Taoism is immoral, okay? So the leader stay away from the people. So the good people, bad people, they then figure out themselves. They will do what good, so-called good for them, but it's not moral. So one important concept is if you set the standard of this is good, okay, that's the good behavior. So if you don't follow, you become the bad. So if you have a standard, that's how bad people coming from, right? So if you say respect your parents is good. So if you don't respect your parents, then you are bad. So how about if you just don't say anything? So there's no good or bad. That's a very simple, naive or entry-level understanding.
So line 4, I think it was line 4 and line 5 had the use of the word moral in it. I can't
Yeah,
recall.
I use moral word. Yeah, so you see here, his moral word can gain, that's my translation. Okay, moral word can gain respect. Moral deed can win admiration, right? The next line said, why are bad people abandoned? So it implied you have moral, you can gain something, you have moral, you can gain something. But in another sense, you abandon the bad people, okay? So if you go back to chapter 2, you talk about everybody in the world know this one is good. That's the best thing coming from, okay? You know this one is bad. Okay, you know something is good, something is valuable. That's something valueless, okay, worthless coming from. So if you praise somebody, if I say, hey, Joe, you are handsome, so the rest people become ugly, right? So the best way is don't set some standard. So everybody will be the same. Let's take this point of view.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. This is an important point. So would love to hear from Quan and Amon about this. And I would also like to comment on this as well. We'll start with Quan. Quan, go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make a discrimination. So I speak for my understanding of Tao, right? So I'm not talking about I agree or that's the wonderful or that's have the great help for society. I'm not talking about this, and I think we should stay away, or at least I will stay away from this discussion because they will become endless. So
Sure.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Jason, you will be happy because my suggestion is precisely on the philosophical question precisely. I don't think that we can say that Taoism is not moral, okay? Because the morality of Confucianism is lower, in my opinion, okay? And I think that the translation by Professor Roberts is excellent. Line 4, fine deeds win man's acclaim, and fine words may buy high station, okay? Here we are not speaking of, and I think that Jason used the perfect word. Confucianism will set social standards, okay? Confucianism, by setting social standards, would say, according to the imperial standard, for example, that stuff is good, that stuff is not good, okay? That is what we call human laws. And that is precisely what Laozi was against, because when you set human standards, of course, that you create an oligarchy capable because they are powerful most of the time. Okay, the standard is very down to earth. And because they have the power, the weapons, the money, and so on, they would say, well, according to us, this is good and this is not good. Okay, and you have to follow our rules. And if you don't follow our rules, you will be punished. And if you follow our rules, you will be rewarded. Okay, that is the practical tool of Confucianism that is called legalism in Chinese civilization.
Yeah, I can.
Do you have something irrepressible that you want to say now? Let's go.
I get what Joe's kind of asking, because what Jason is saying is correct about the amoralism of Taoism. It does not try to prescribe a moralism. That doesn't make it without any morals. It simply doesn't dictate them to anyone to be had. And the way I like to think about this is, I have always said for many years, I want a gigantic bumper sticker about yay big that I could slap over the back of people's cars when they have a bunch, to tell them you have too many opinions. That's what I want it to be able to say and cover all those bumper stickers, because nobody has a bumper sticker that says something as obvious as child abuse is wrong. Yeah, we kind of all agree with that. So because everyone universal, it's not in contention, it's not something you have to prescribe. It's something that just kind of saying it the first time out of the gate, most people would be like, yeah. When you get down into prescriptive details of what constitutes that, that's where you'll start to see friction and disagreement. You know, does taking away their iPad do more harm than amputating a limb? The children certainly seem to think so, but the parents feel that that is not the case. When you get down into the nitty-gritty, you start, you know, getting into these minutia battles. But the broad principle is almost about beyond a sort of contention. Therefore, the prescription of Taoism is keep that high principle in mind and keep focused on it. And when you see something that you have the inclination to say, this is good, this is bad, be careful, because you may wind up doing more harm than good. You may wind up actually working at cross purposes. The child abuse example, horribly, FOFSA a couple of years ago passed in the United States, changing internet laws, took down some of these adult sites, the sites that basically were prostitution connections, and everyone applauded themselves. But the FBI actually said these were our best resources for child trafficking. These sites were so desperate to not get taken down that they did the hard work of recognizing when an ad came up that they flagged and drew to our attention, and suddenly our ability to track child trafficking has dropped by nearly 60%. That's the kind of unintended consequence of making a good or bad decision and getting bogged down in those details, as opposed to paying attention to that. Here's the principle that we're going after. What is working to help it? What is working to harm it?
And I would like to say that what Aman just said is precisely Confucianism at its best. Okay, because the question of Confucianism is imposing certain standards, but some standards are well thought and some standards are not well thought. That is the difference. In the case of Taoism, the ambition is much, 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 much higher. The ambition is infinite awareness. Okay, so the ambition here, and that's why I say that it's not possible to say that Taoism is amoral or is not moral. On the contrary, Taoism is an invitation to go to the supreme source of morality, which is infinite awareness, precisely. But Confucianism said that infinite awareness is not open to everyone. We would have to set some social standards, but this opened a secondary question. What are the most skillful social standards? And what Amun said for me, it's not a defense of Taoism, it's a defense of the skillful form of Confucianism. I stop here.
Thank you. Thank you, Quan. Next up is Jason.
Let me make a point different than Quan's talking about. I fully understand you are talking about the Taoism will be the highest, so which Confucius cannot match. So my concept is no hierarchy, so basically all evil. So the highest is zero. Okay, so that's my point. Okay, so so you can see my translation. Usually I avoid the word absolute oneness, unless they use E as one. Okay, I avoid oneness, I avoid unity. Okay, so I do see, I almost want to translate Tao as everyday. So you can see my view is different than Huang's view. I'm not saying you are wrong, I'm right, but basically I'm talking about we have a different point of view on the whole concept, I say metaphysical level.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. So I also want to chime in. I think, Joe, I mean, that's a great question. And I mostly kind of agree with how Quan looks at it. The way I think of it is that it's, you know, the Western equivalence of this is the difference between the concept of natural law and positive law. Like there is a natural law. So what Tao is trying to get at is saying that there is a natural law. There is something very deep about nature, of how nature works, and try to grasp that and try to act according to that. So it is definitely a moral. It's you know, it's moral to follow the Tao. And so it is very much moral. But it is about saying, keep paying attention to the Tao, you know, through kind of, again, change the context, you know, again, the Western thing, it's saying that you will be judged by God. You'll be judged by truth. It's as opposed to the laws of man. So Confucianism is all about civilization. Tao is mostly about nature, but it is trying to use the nature as a base for metaphysics, for epistemology, for ethics, for politics, as best as it can. So, and its goals are very lofty, are very lofty. And Confucianism is saying, look, we need to run the civilization, and here is what we can do to run the civilization. So it may seem that they are, you know, that they are, it is not moral or it is not focused on law, but it's a different approach to law. That's my understanding. Next up is going to be Quan, followed by Mark.
Okay, I already talk a lot, so I will be very short. The apparent simplicity of Taoism is the simplicity of a billionaire saying that money is not important. I stop here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Next up is Mark.
Yeah, thanks. I like Juan's last analogy, as many of his analogies. So I'm going to make a comment here. So I'm at a significant disadvantage in this conversation relative to a lot of the other people who have spoken, because you know, I'm not a native Chinese speaker. My Chinese is very weak. My grasp of Chinese history isn't that great. I do feel like I have a few kind of particular aspects which give me a slightly different viewpoint, which is kind of a broader view of ancient history and kind of a different interpretation of certain philosophies, which I would classify as amoral, like Epicureanism, Ajivita in India, Nietzsche, and Stirner. So from that standpoint, I'm going to say I generally think that I'm more in agreement with Jason. Like there's a line in the Dao Te Ching one that I can't remember it right for exactly, but it's something like the Tao avoids places, avoids, or the Tao seeks places avoided by all, like water. It lies before things, below things instead of above them. So to me, I like Jason's analogy of zero in the non kind of hierarchical way. And I have a different conception of morality, I think. Most people think, oh, morality is good, amorality or immorality is bad. So to me, those are constructs of class society. And those are the dominant ideologies which the ruling class uses to organize society for its own benefit. But the roots of Taoism and its aspirations, I think, when it's always talking about the past and how things were in the past, and I'm really shooting from the hip here because I'd like to be corrected by Quan or others, but there's this kind of like return, this aspiration to return to like a pre-class society or a primitive kind of communal society where you don't have these rulers and elites that are saying, oh, this is right, this is wrong, obey the king, this is property, this is yours, this is not yours, this is mine, etc., etc. So from that standpoint, I generally see morality as a kind of ideological hegemony of the ruling class that enforces a certain way of thinking. And from that standpoint, I tend to, and this is probably a little bit different the way Jason sees it, but I tend to see the Tao Te Ching as free moral in that its conception is for a human relationship with pre-hierarchical or pre-class. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. All right, folks, we are a little bit behind time, so let's go to number 63. Go ahead. Anybody who would like to read their favorite translation, go ahead and type an exclamation mark or raise your hand in Zoom. We're going to start with Quan. Quan, go ahead.
Okay, translation by Professor Roberts, stanza 63. Do what is undone, serve the unserved, savor what lacks savor. Make big or smaller, more or less, repay a wrong with friendly favor. Forestall trouble when it's easy to, act on the major when it's still minor. For this world's troubles start with simple things, and major matters rise from little ones. Thus the wise, not making much of them, can always see their great words through. But lightly granted, rarely honored, and much too easy means much trouble. Even the wisest looks for the trouble ahead and ends up with the trouble spared.
Thank you, Quan. Next up is Jyoti. Folks, if you'd like to read your favorite translation, go ahead and type an exclamation mark. Jyoti, go ahead.
Okay, this is by Stephen Mitchell. Act without doing, work without effort. Think of the small as large and the few as many. Confront the difficult while it is still easy. Accomplish the great task by the series of small acts. The master never reaches for the great. Thus, she achieves greatness when she runs into a difficulty. She drops and gives herself it. She doesn't cling to her own comfort. Thus, problems are no problem for her. Thank you.
Thank you, Jyoti. Next up is Brian. Brian, if you could unmute. Brian? Okay, looks like there is some problem. Give me just 1 second. Go ahead, Brian. Okay, let's continue with Aman. Brian, go ahead. Now you can speak.
Okay. Okay. The version I'm going to read is from Yasuhiko Kimura. Act from the still fulcrum of non-action. Engage from the still fulcrum of non-engagement. Experience from the still fulcrum of non-experience. Regard the insignificant as significant. Regard the minor as major. Requite the unkind with kindness. Meet the difficult while it is still easy. Solve the major while it is still minor. Difficult problems of the world always arise from easy ones. Major issues of the world always arise from minor ones. Therefore, the sage never deals with major issues, yet his action always leads to major accomplishment. Those who commit lightly are seldom to be trusted. Those who assume things to be easy are always met with difficulties. Therefore, the sage assumes everything to be difficult and ends up having no difficulty at all. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to read from Ursula Le Guin. Do without doing, act without action, savor the flavorless, treat the small as large, the few as many, meet injury with the power of goodness, study the hard while it's easy, do big things while they're small. The hardest job in the world start out easy. The great affairs of the world are small. So the wise soul, by never dealing with great things, gets great things done. Now, since taking things too lightly makes them worthless, and taking things too easy makes them hard, the wise soul, by treating the easy as hard, doesn't find anything hard. All right, Amon and Jason.
Jason, do you want to share your screen or do you want me to?
You share the screen in case
Okay.
I
Yep.
Today we are earthquake proof.
Chapter 63, without difficulties. Act by non-action, way. Interfere by non-interference, and taste the tasteless. Do what is large when it is small. Address many things when they are few. Settle complaints with duh. Plan difficult things when they are still easy. Do great things when they are still small. Difficult things in the world surely begin with ease. Great things in the world surely begin small. Therefore, the sage never aims to do any great things, but they can achieve great things. Those who promise lightly must not be trustworthy. Those who treat things easily must face difficulties. For this reason, the sage treats things as if they are difficult. Therefore, they never have any difficulties.
Yeah, thank you, Amon. So I think this one, the first line is the most important lesson. And then I decide to translate just word to word instead of give too many interpretations. I give to just word to word. Act by non-action, interfere by non-interfering. The taste, the tasteless. Okay, so 为无为，事无事，谓无谓. Okay, that's very simple. 9 words, 9 characters. So I think it's a typical Dao De Jing logic, right? You give a lesson, okay, act non-action, okay, interfere non-interfering. Then you give you a daily common sense, taste the tasteless, okay, kind of like if you enjoy Japanese sashimi, okay, you will know what do you mean, the taste, the tasteless, right? You get the cold dead fish without any sauce, okay? You taste the tasteless thing, so consider as most delicious food, okay? So that's the concept of this. So second line is also very simple. 大小多少，抱怨以德. Okay, that's very simple. but it's called the translation difficult in translation because it's I think I should read the treat what should the treat the great thing when they are small, when the deal the many things when they are little. So this 63, and I think we should read this one. Well, we don't have a chance to read today. We run out of time. 64. I think both, if you keep in mind, read together, that give you a personal lesson about Wu Wei. Because we have been talking about Wu Wei for a long time. What do you mean? You practice non-action and nothing left undone. Okay, so basics, he is talking about doing early when things are small. Here you talk about plan difficult things when they are still easy. So you seems like not doing anything because when things are very small, when many things, the things not become, when your room is not totally messed up, you start to deal with that, then everything will be much easier. So I think that's the attitude the Dao De Jing is trying to teach on this one. And here, another thing I'd like to mention is settle complaint with De. In Confucius analect, right? Talking about Confucius kind of talking about you should not deal with complaint with De. You should use straightforward, okay? You should deal with complaint with straight honesty, this kind of concept. So I'm not sure, is this one is talking to Confucius or Confucius talking to this thing? I don't know. Okay, but basically that's a relation, another difference concept here. Taoism is talking about deal with complaint or resentment with De, and Confucius, okay, is talking about deal with complaint with straightforward, okay, straightforwardness or honest, okay. So look, guys, here has a different concept here. So I will stop here, and that amount, you have.
Thank you. Speaking of complaints, I was told the screen was a little blurry. I hope enlarging it makes it a little clearer for everybody. And here's where I think one of the most profound lessons of Taoism exists, because read any texts on Taoism, talk to any Taoist, even throughout this meetup, we've talked about Wu Wei, the importance of Wu Wei. And everyone gets that wrong, because here Laozi tells us, Wei, Wu Wei, act, not action. Wu Wei is so commonly misunderstood as doing nothing. And here is not the lesson to do nothing. Act, no action. Do, but don't do. Do, but do not. It is a paradox for the Taoists to grapple with. And what it actually means in simple terms is enough, just enough. Do enough, and not a tiniest smidge more, because that tiniest smidge more is when that boulder starts to snowball. So do enough. Don't interfere by interfering. I love this chapter. It holds all the key lessons of Taoism. Plan the difficult things when they're still easy. Deal with great things when they are still small. There is the trope that goes around that says, don't sweat the small things. Any good Taoist should know, sweat the small things. They're the only things worth sweating, because they're the only things you have any control over. Don't sweat the big things. You're not going to affect that. The Tao is going to be the Tao, but you can sure as hell determine that you're going to affect that one thing. So there are lessons here that feel very counter to some of the classic tropes of Taoism, the classic understanding of Taoism. But if there is a moral directive, it all exists here. Treat those big issues, not by treating every iota, but one little thing within your control. That's what you can do. Doing enough to get the ball rolling can be enough to make great changes, but you shoulder it all yourself and you're probably in for a landslide on your head. I would extol anyone who's interested. Read 63 many times and really deep read it, and you'll get some of the core Taoist lessons of what the moral imperative of Taoism is. The only other thing I'd add is don't trust the people who say, trust me. I teach self-defense. I have for over 26 years now. And what I tell people in every class are the two single most dangerous words in the English language are I promise. Not because people are untrustworthy and not because people break their promises, but because when somebody says that to you, one, they're not making a guarantee. I promise is not the same thing as a guarantee. A guarantee is I will or else this. I promise means I saw on your face that you don't believe me and I want you to believe me. So I'm going to tell you I promise. Anytime you hear those two words, your antenna should be going skyrocketingly high that why don't I trust this person? You should interrogate your own feelings about it. People who promise lightly are not trustworthy. People who treat things easily must face difficulties. Treating things easily, like, it's not going to be any big deal. Yeah, I'll get that fixed. It's the contractor phenomena of, oh yeah, we'll get that repaired in just a couple of days. A couple of days, as anyone who's dealt with any contractor probably knows, is never a couple of days. There's always a little bit more on the inventory. So yeah, read 63 a lot and you will get the heart of Taoism.
Thank you. Thank you, Amon. Folks, comments now. Comments, questions. We're going to start with Madeline, Kwan, and Mark. Madeline.
Yeah, thanks. This is really quite beautiful, and it does indeed spell it out. I liked your example, Amon, because it is on a very practical level. So you don't want to take the time to take your car in for a regular tune-up, because it's going to be too much bother. But really, what's going to be more bother, doing that or having to break down at the side of the highway because the transmission is shot and they would have caught it had you taken the time to do that? You know, you don't want to go in for a routine physical. I feel healthy, I'll put it off, gets put off, and then you have some major thing going on that had you caught it early, you know, you could have done something about it. Or I don't want to pay this bill, it's too much money, I'll just put it off. Then the whole thing goes into collection, and then your life is a living heck. And so it's the incredibly practical things like that that I think this is addressing. Is there a lazier way I can do this thing in this chain of events? Like, what's the laziest possible way I can organize my dishwashing duties to make it the least work and still accomplish the task? Is it, you know, and depending on how you want to do it, some people, I tend to be one of them, will actually sit and take more time working out how to do it after lots of trial and error, because I don't want to have to keep stumbling through the same set of things again, like the dishes or something. And I'd rather take the time to sit back and say, okay, how do I get a system going so that I don't have to deal with the snowballed situation later on? And I wish I had known all this decades ago.
Thank you. Thank you, Madeline. All right, next up is Quan, Mark, and Paul.
Well, Aman, before I go into my comment, I want to say that the example you gave, not I promise, but if I don't do something, there will be that consequences. Aman, I congratulate you. That is the purest Confucianist statement that I have heard in all my life. And that being said, I want to read simply the command by Professor Roberts that can be useful for precisely the difference between the Tao perspective and the Confucianist perspective, okay? The Confucian model is to develop a world order out of the educated statement in government service by setting standards, social standards, based on the logic of from the self to the other. As you establish and achieve for yourself, establish and achieve for the other. And that is in Analect 6.28. Laozi, on the other hand, like Mozi, and I would like to remind everyone that Mozi was from a peasant background, contrary to Laozi and Confucius, who were both from an aristocratic background. So Laozi, on the other hand, like Mozi, sees the development of the self and its sphere as an obstacle to the ordering of the world, not as a precondition for it. And I would like to remind everyone that one of the famous statements from Confucianism is the following. It is absolutely normal for the gentleman to desire sex, good food, and good clothing, and good housing. The only thing that the gentleman needs to get those things in a moral way, meaning that Confucianism will lower the standards and will set precisely what Aman said 10 minutes ago. I will do it. If not, that is the consequences, okay? That is giving a framework for social interactions. And once again, I don't want to be a pain in the neck for anyone, but maybe that's what I wish for. Taoism is of the highest morality in the sense that it is the morality from infinite awareness, and infinite awareness is not the characteristic of everybody. That's why Confucianism tried to give a middle way. I stop here.
Thank you, Quan. Next up is going to be Mark, followed by Paul. Mark.
Hi, thanks. I actually have 3 questions, but I'm just going to ask 2 of them because one of them is kind of unrelated, but the other 2 are pretty closely connected, so I'll just stick to that. So looking at the first and third characters on the first line of this chapter, with identical pronunciation, at least in modern Chinese, although the tone is a little different, it makes me wonder how much of the word choice in the Tao Te Ching in general is for poetic purposes as opposed to conceptual purposes, like especially with the second triplet. So the first one, the active non-action, that's a theme we've seen other places too. But the tasting the tasteless, it seems like, you know, it could have been seeing the invisible or hearing the silence or something else. It seems like there could have been another choice, but perhaps wouldn't have had the identical pronunciation. So that's the first question. And then the second one, which is closely related, which makes me wonder if this kind of analysis is even possible given our understanding of the ancient Chinese, because given the ideographic nature of Chinese and the technological constraints, it makes me wonder, can we even know that this character way, taste, had the same pronunciation when the Dao De Jing was written as the way action at the time? So is that way of thinking about the poetic choice versus the conceptual choice, is that an analysis that can even be done in contemporary times? Okay, that's it. Thank you.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I'd like to answer Mark's question because that's my primary interest when I read the ancient Chinese texts about the philosophy. Because I'm less interested in what they are teaching. I'm more interested in how they are teaching. Okay, in other words, I'm interested in philosophizing. So you can see in Analect, it's a very simple dialogue. Okay, just kind of like a doctrine. You just throw off the things. And I just talk about in general. It's not everything. Taoism argument is the Dao De Jing argument is different, right? They look like they use very plain words, okay, very daily words, and a lot of poetry on that, okay, very simple, only 5,000 characters. Go to Zhuangzi, okay, even it's belong to the Taoism teaching, you will see they use very beautiful, complex words, a lot of name and long story after story. And you know the story is not true, but the principle are true, but the story are not true. They keep telling the story on that. You read in Mencius, even he is a Confucian student, but he to also have a dialogue. But he start to put some reason on that to argue something. He pick up the enemy, Moism, okay, Yang Zhu, okay, to argue against. He has a lot of words to say. Go to another like legalism or the Xunzi, another Confucianism. They write an essay, okay, just today's essay. They have the opening, they have the reason, they have the something, they have the conclusion, a very well essay on that. So they all have the different flavor on each one. And I think that's the beautiful part of reading all this kind of different. Just like when you read Plato and read Aristotle, that's a totally different style of writing. That's the part I'm interested. Yeah.
Thank you, Jason. Really appreciate that. Next up is going to be Paul, followed by Nick. Paul.
Yeah, my question / observation revolves around some of the examples that Aman gave, and this being a really good example, a good chapter to look at for Wu Wei, in that I want to say that I understand these examples as if someone, for instance, did these things that are catching things early, the contractor, the physical health, those examples Madeline gave. What if a person is in the Tao or practicing the Tao, a side effect of it is the kind of behavior you guys are talking about. As opposed to, if you're doing those things, it shows you're practicing the Tao, because many people, as an example, before Agile, there was extreme programming, and the motto of it was, do the simplest thing that could possibly work. And then there's Occam's razor, and there's a lot of ways of approaching life with minimalist, like catch it early, do this. And one could live that way and think that way and have no concept of Wu Wei. Similarly, I'm asking this now, one could actually take many, many, many small processes and from them develop a space capsule that can fly to Mars, a very complex job. And they would also be practicing Wu Wei. I'm kind of asking that. So that's my point.
I think you said go ahead, Shrikant, but you were muted, so I'm going to take that as a jumping point. Actually, Paul, I think you're absolutely right. My Sifu has said on many occasions that he's met better Taoists who didn't know they were Taoists outside of Asia than some of the Taoists he's met at the Plum Flower Temple or the White Cloud Temple or the so-called, Taoist. Yes, practicing the principle is what makes somebody a Taoist. And somebody who is engaged in that natural flow is what makes them following the Tao, following the natural law, following the path of least resistance. And as I said in the chat, every teacher is in the career field of passing the buck, which is the least amount of possible effort you could put into changing the world, but takes a whole lot of effort to be that lazy. I speak from experience. There's all kinds of ways to go about this. My favorite example is actually a concrete example, because the practice of Tai Chi can be an exercise in living or emoting Taoist ideas. And my Sifu has been practicing since 1946. I believe he turns 87 this year. And he once was famous for saying in class, I went to Hawaii. I saw hula dancers perform the most beautiful Tai Chi I have ever seen. They were much better than any of those upstarts at Wudan, which it broke my heart a little to hear, but at the same time gets at this point that, yes, these are all ways of doing this. You can do it the obsessive compulsive way by putting your keys in the same place every time, your hat in the same place every time. I'm speaking from personal experience. That way I don't have to think about finding them in the morning. If I have to expend that energy before I've had coffee, the world is going sideways. Other people can get into that groove in other ways and still be effortlessly performative and effective in what they're doing. And that's probably the biggest example of Wei Wu Wei. And I always talk about it as Wei Wu Wei when I'm not getting coaxed into just talking about Wu Wei.
Thank you. Next up is Jason, and then Nick, Quan, and Mark.
Yeah, I just want to respond to Paul, but then at that time, as an earthquake come again, so, so a smaller one, but so I just have to double check, you know. So, but I think with this one, I think 64. Okay, I for sure we have no chance to do this one, and the next week and next 2 weeks, Huang will talk about kind of introduction to I Ching. Okay, that's switch gear. And just please remember, 2 weeks later, I think on 23rd, when we come back, 64, please make connection with 60. Right now we are on 63. Okay, connection with 63 and 64. I think they are tightly connected together, and they give you a concept what to do on Wu Wei, give you a good answer on how to personally, I feel I benefit a lot because, for example, I always remember talk about 1,000 miles journey start from one step, right? If you never start, you never finish thing. You start thing from the small. To me, I think that's very important lesson about Wu Wei. And here, thank you.
Thank you, Jason. All right, next up is going to be Nick, followed by Quan. Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to comment on Mark's question on the stylistic of the Chinese old writings. There are 2 points I heard. One is how do they sound today? So China is a big country, so there's a lot of dialects. So the most popular dialect is what they call the standard one. So that one has almost nothing to do with the way the old writings sound. So that it is totally different. But there are some traces of the tone and the way they sound get kept in southern dialect, like Cantonese, for example. Cantonese is a dialect that I myself don't understand. So it's very different. But that kept some of the old, 2,000 years old even, ways of speaking. So scholars could still go around. There are even less popular dialects that conserve certain ways of pronouncing words. So they could still go around and figure out, what these old ancient guys meant when they, if they were to verbalize whatever they write. So, so the connection is there, but it's a scholarly one. The next comment is more interesting to me. You comment on the way they choose the word they write, and this is one of the peculiar Chinese scholarship. I think was present 2,000 years ago and continues today till today, which is to not differentiate three subjects: literature, philosophy, history. So whoever writes in philosophical, metaphysical, moral area, they have to know the history and demonstrate they know it. They have to be able to write as a very good literary figure, and they have to be able to talk about their thought. So the situation that somebody who doesn't know history, who doesn't know literature, who writes badly, but have a brilliant idea and write it down with the rambling of words, would never take off in China. So like Hegel would never take off in China. Hegel is popular in China because he influenced Marx, and Marx is popular in China. That's only because of that. But if we're talking about writing styles, the way that Laozi, Dao De Jing was written is exactly the way Chinese scholarship look up to, and therefore, and the 9 letters you cited at the beginning of this verse would appear to the eyes of Chinese reader without loss of any meaning.
Thank you, Nick. Great observation. Next up is going to be Quan, followed by Mark. Quan.
Yes, I would like to come back to the Wei Wu Wei. Let's not forget that Wei means to be motivated by something. Okay, so Wu Wei doesn't mean that you don't act, but your action is precisely, and I'm sorry to come back to one of my catchphrases, your action is precisely centered on infinite awareness and not because of your selfish motivation. Okay, so once again, I come back to the fact that Taoism is, on the contrary, the highest morality that is possible. Or as Shrikant, what you said, I think you make the interesting distinction in terms of words, okay? Because after all, we communicate by words, okay? And in philosophy, a clear philosophy is the philosophy that would choose the right words to make distinction between clear concepts. And Confucianism is the human attempt to set some basic standards. Taoism is the invitation to the infinite awareness, meaning that, and I think that Wu Wei, if I have to choose 2 words to summarize Taoism, is precisely Wu Wei, because all Taoism in that, and I would say all high philosophy is in Wu Wei. Okay, is it possible for us, a creature of flesh and of bones, to act without being centered on our small self? Okay, Wei, motivated by our small self, and it is precisely the ambitions of Confucianism that is called the Shanran, the sage, what Taoism would call nobody, okay? Because Taoism characteristically would call the sage nobody, okay? As I said, it's the simplicity of the billionaire who says that money is not important, okay? That nobody is precisely the highest person that can exist on this planet. A little bit like I said that that Osho is my guru. Osho famously gave a definition of a Buddha as a nobody. Okay, he's right. A Buddha is a nobody in the sense that he doesn't have personal motivations. But to reach to that state of infinite awareness, it is a long way to go. And Wu Wei is, and that's why I said that that's the simplicity of the billionaire saying it's money is not important. Confucianism, paradoxically, because Confucianism is often perceived as the doctrine of the aristocrats and of the elite, which is true. But another way to see it is that Confucianism is much humbler than Taoism. Confucianism say we are being of flesh and bone. Let's try to find some human standards that we can respect, and let's build a society from those very fragile, very humble human standards. And Taoism, on the contrary, and I'm not against Taoism, I'm a passionate of Taoism, on the contrary, invite us to the infinite journey, to infinite awareness. So here we have a paradox. Taoism, which is often perceived by most people as very humble, on the contrary, it's not humble at all. It is offering the highest prize to those who understand it. Okay, how can you act without being centered on your small self? And Confucianism is much humbler. Yes, it is okay to love sex. Yes, it is okay to love having beautiful clothes. Yes, it is okay to love having good meals. Yes, it is okay to love having a social status, but try to get those stuff in the correct way. And that's all. I stop here.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Quan. Jason, go ahead, and then Mark.
Yeah, I think it's an important concept I want to make clear here. Okay, one of the purpose I have to say, many, if you go to college, go to academic work, a lot of interpretation will be different than my interpretation. Okay, doesn't mean I'm wrong or they are wrong, but I feel I have a obligation to make clear on the Chinese philosophy because they've been spoiled by Confucianism for a long time. One common sense we already talked about last week. People said, okay, we will practice Confucianism when you during the weekday, doing Taoism during the weekend. We are successful. We are doing Confucianism. We are not successful. We're doing Taoism. I think I should reverse it. I feel I have obligation to reverse it. Another thing is moral. One common sense, okay, just talking about billionaire say money is not important. If you are poor, you say I don't care about money. I think that's the wrong concept because the idea is not like poor man's philosophy. Basics is talking about equality. Okay, I don't care. Okay, leave me alone. This kind of concept, and I think that one implied a great individualism and freedom, which Chinese for 1,000 years tradition lack of. Okay, and I feel my responsibility is reverse this, which I probably against most of scholar, Chinese scholar, and also Western philosophy when they look at Asian philosophy. I think, especially in the ancient time, it's very free, very individual. And I think I have the responsibility to reverse it. That's my concept. Yeah, thank you.
Wonderful, Jason. That's a great point, because this is like an individual communing with nature on his own. That's the vision of the sage of in Dao De Jing, and it is very profound, and it has the lowestness, the kind of the low is the high, water, because it goes
I think you got this one. And another thing is, because I grew up in Taiwan and I've been taught the Chinese philosophy or Chinese tradition not suitable for individualism, not suitable for democracy. And then I totally disagree. And I think, with right understanding, we understand Chinese philosophy, or through Chinese philosophy or any philosophy, you have a way to be free. You have a way to be individualism. And I think that will make life much happier. At least my point of view.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, I see, for example, in Taoism, I see a line between Taoism and Christianity. in a very, very strong line, because it's basically kind of accepting of nature, or kind of God the Father on one hand. It is also, I mean, this point about kind of the lowest is the highest. It's like the Christ kind of, when the apostles are arguing which is the greatest, he takes a child and puts him there and says that, that is the ideal of being a child. It's the same thing with Lao Tzu. What he's saying is that approach to reality, that curiosity, that openness, that malleability, letting nature mold you, and kind of acting according to nature without kind of preconceptions, without blindly trusting the society around you, and kind of keeping on going back to nature, even when you're ridiculed. Keep doing that. And it's a very profound idea. And it is definitely, the awareness that PG talks about. And that's the root of freedom. So it is profoundly freedom oriented. So just thank you for bringing that up. And I think a lot of impression of the Chinese philosophy is dominated by Confucianism, because they kind of regard Taoism, like many scholars. I don't know. I don't know the Chinese context, the corpus, and how people look at it. But I just see Tao. I just see Dao De Jing, and I see just profound truth about human nature, not just about nature, but about human nature in it. And it is very liberating. So I agree with you. Next up is going to be Mark, followed by Joe. Mark.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I wanted to thank Jason and Nick for their comments on my question about the role of poetry, the Tao Te Ching. And I also really appreciated Kwan's kind of turning things on its head when he used the analogy talking about how even though Confucianism is like the ideology of the aristocrats, in some ways it's more humble because of its more pedestrian, simplistic nature, whereas Taoism is in some ways kind of like more abstract and efficient. So I wanted to ask my third question, which is about the way I understand Wu Wei, or at least one of the ways I understand it. Is one of the ways, and I'm looking for anybody's response here, if anybody wants to comment on this. One of the ways I think about it, like active inaction, is forbearance or self-restraint. Like people encounter something and they have an idea, they want to do something, they want to state their opinion, they have like an impulse or a desire to do something. One of passage, I think it's from the Tao Te Ching, says something like, you can let muddy water clarify by allowing it to settle, or something like that, where it postulates a situation where anything you do is just going to prolong the result that you desire. And so a lot of times the best thing to do, in a sense, is nothing, but in a sense, it's not nothing, because it takes energy and effort to restrain oneself from acting. Like when I feel like, oh, I should state my opinion, or oh, I don't agree with that, or that person offended me, or I feel upset, or I feel this or that, I want to act, and then a part of myself goes, okay, but is acting, like, is that gonna turn out best in the long run? So that's where I come up with this. I kind of tend to translate it as forbearance and self-restraint. So I'm wondering if anybody else wants to comment on the degree to which they think that's correct or incorrect. Thank you.
Thank you. Great question, Mark. Aman, what's Wu Wei?
Patience does factor in. Archimedes is credited with saying, give me a lever long enough and a fulcrum on which to place it, and I shall move the world. And a Taoist would add, when the timing's right, because timing is a crucially important element of Taoism and of the teachings of Lao Tzu. You have to what is enough? Enough is when to act. All the advice is act early, act when it's small, act when it's easy to move that lever against a fulcrum. But that doesn't mean be hasty. It does mean being sensitive to what is actually in flow and merging with that, not fighting against it. Surfing is one of the greatest physical activity examples you could actually see of this. To catch a wave as a surfer is an act in sensitivity to what is a natural phenomena you have no control over, and not trying to fight it, not trying to control it, but trying to ride it. I've given many examples of this before. If I could encapsulate Wu Wei into one bulletproof pamphlet to hand to people, I would be a Taoist hero. I don't have the ability to encapsulate it that small, because it's a lifetime exercise of sensitivity. It is a lifetime exercise in recognizing opportunities, often once they've passed, and then recognizing them again when they arise again, because the universe is cyclic that way. I am very sorry. We're not going to be meeting the next couple of weeks, but I will be traveling, so I'm not going to be too sorry. I will be looking forward to seeing everybody in 2 weeks. And Jason, if there ever is another earthquake, just go. Just
yes,
ride.
please. Yes, please.
No, that's
Oh my God. Mark just
let
dropped
me ask
into
you what you can do on earthquake. Can you stop the earthquake?
No,
You
but
just-
there
You just
there
choose
is
what you most enjoyable to do. You know, if you have to die, if you have to do something, at least at the last moment, I'm doing the thing I like to do, not struggle. So
Mark just put into the chat the earthquake live update. Tsunami warning has been issued 7.4. It's the largest in 25 years. If there's a tsunami, the one thing you can do, get to high ground. You
But
can
let
do
me
what
tell
you
you
love there.
let me tell you, that's a wonderful experience. If you are coming to Taiwan, go to the high top. Because right now the new building, they make it like a earthquake proof. So they, instead of stiff, right, they shave, right? They shave. So it feels like you are on the boat. I think the amount will feel it next week, because it's like doing this way, and it feels scary, more scary, but actually it's safer, because that's an earthquake proof. So.
To go with the flow, not to fight it and stand still. That's very Taoist architecture.
Yes, Amon, please be surfing at the top of one of these buildings during the earthquake to fully experience or fully and the Wu Wei.
Jason, are you in a coastal area or are you in the interior somewhere?
I'm in the Taipei city. I'm in the Taipei city. So, you know, it's another tall building, and I'm glad because in 1997, is that 1996? That's September 21st earthquake. That's 2,000 people died in Taiwan. And after that, you know, Taiwan to redo a lot of building code and then become much more safer.
Actually, what Mark had put in chat was about a tsunami. That's the
I'm
wall.
not sure. Oh, tsunami will not happen in Taiwan usually. It happen in Japan. Okay, so I'm not sure. My sister is Japan. I'm not sure. So I'm going to call her later.
All right. All right. Jason, you should just take care of yourself, please.
Yeah, don't worry. It's I look at outside, everybody just walk like normal. So nobody panic, because the worst thing is the panic. So
All All right. Next up is going to be Joe, followed by Mark. And Jason, do you need to leave, or you can stay around? Whatever
I
you.
stay around for another 10 minutes. Then I probably leave without announcement. So
All right. I need to take a call. So Jason, if you could moderate, or Kwan, if you could moderate. Okay.
I can do it if nobody else can. Next up was Joe. So Joe, please, thanks for your patience.
No problem. I just have a question, just a little, my infinite state of confusion all the time. Can only a sage achieve the infinite awareness? And is the sage just an ideal, or can it be achieved by somebody walking today in this life? Or has it been achieved? I hope that makes sense.
I will let somebody else tackle that
yeah,
one.
let me answer this one. Sage in all, because okay, even many philosophy in the pre-Qin, the ancient Chinese philosophy, they disagree on many ways. But one thing in common is sage. Whenever they say sage, that means the good thing you have to be, it must be your model or your goal. Okay, doesn't matter which school. But how does sage act? That would be different from school to school. So whenever you talk about sage, that's the thing to model. I think that's important.
I don't know if that answers it sufficiently, but we'll see if anyone else has an answer. Mark, you're next.
Thanks, Evan. I enjoyed the conversation. Haven't been able to participate, but I know that I don't know if you discussed this line from 63 about repaying resentment with kindness. That really reminded me of the Sermon on the Mount. I know that Srikant has been trying to draw lines between the Tao Te Ching and Christianity. But I didn't get to see Jason and Milan's translation of 63. So
Hang
do you
on,
know
I'll
the
share
line?
my screen.
You know the line I'm talking about?
For this reason, oh, go ahead, Jason.
63 on 63. Okay. Are you showing? You move the other direction. Yeah, do great. Yeah, here. Do great things when they are still small. No. Oh, yeah. Settle complaints with the. Okay, so.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Okay, in a way, you can say that's a Christian. Okay, same as a Christian, right? Because turn your cheek. Okay, but another way we didn't discuss much on this one because depending on how you interpret the word "de," if you do it in a Confucian way, right? The "de" has a moral sense. Okay, so better translation for "de" is virtue. So you will say, okay, you settle the or you can. There also the meaning of the benevolence. Okay, this kind of meaning. So if you settle the complaint or somebody misbehave with some virtue or with some benevolence, which is kind of too much. But in a way, if you receive the as a way, okay, a power, so in its way, it's not much difference than what Confucius is talking about because that really depends on how you understand the word "de," okay, virtue, or you want to call the power, okay. So that's really depend on how you read this one.
It's amazing how so many of the translations I looked at make it sound exactly like Christianity.
Oh yeah. You can make it this way, and then because that's really on the "de." How are you going to translate the "de"? Okay, this word you can translate as the virtue, and the virtue or you can have some like nice way. You treat people in a nice way. You can call De, right? Benevolence, this kind you call De. Power, you also can be De. So because this word has different meaning. Yeah.
Yeah, I would add to that possibly one of the reasons you find so many English translations that have sort of that Christian overtone to it is that the earliest translators were Christian men, and they were bringing their own sort of preconceived box of understanding to the literature. And so it was very easy to then just parallel and say, oh, well, this is like virtue, and that means benevolence. But you can see where that gets a little fuzzy when we've encountered other words like ren that also sometimes get translated as benevolence, and ren and de are not the same thing by any stretch of the imagination. Did anyone else have, we're in kind of open comment time now, and so if anyone has any other impressions, excuse me, that they wanted to share, or any questions that they still had lingering, here's the time and now's the place.
Okay, let's have
I have-
Ella have the final say. Then Bill Shinkan has left, and then then we probably have no further discussion after Ella's comment, and then next 2 weeks will be Kwang's section, and I will join as a participant, so I will speak less.
And
So
Jason, if you need to take off, you go right ahead. I'll stick around to at least field this one more question. Ella has her hand up, and then we'll see if there's anything else. Be safe, my friend, please.
I already safe. Yeah, I'm very
Oh.
safe. And I already safe, and then I'm happy, and everybody stay calm. And because I look outside, people just do the same thing exactly after earthquake and before earthquake. So
Full confession, not everyone was staying calm. I was watching slack-jawed and slightly in terror on your behalf.
don't watch social media. That's wrong.
No, you're watching your room shake. Ella, go right ahead. Ella, you're still muted. Ella, you've got a hand up. We'd love to hear what you have to say. Mark, if you want to jump ahead, if Ella gets unmuted, I may ask you to just hold a thought, but go ahead.
Sure. So I'm not sure where I read this, but this was a couple years ago. I read something by some scholar of ancient Chinese philosophy. I think he was a non-Chinese person, but I think he was like a pretty well-renowned one, who asserted that a more accurate translation of day into English from the ancient conception would be power, and that although day in modern Chinese is more accurately translated as virtue, the ancient concept, kind of Dao Te Ching was written, would be more accurately power. And there used to be a Chinese gentleman who came to Jason's group from Datong, China. I can't remember his name, but he also agreed with that assessment. And I'm wondering what you think about that, or have you heard about that proposed translation as an alternative?
I can understand how somebody could make that assertion. Really, when I use the term and say that I think virtue is a good English equivalency, it's good, but it is now a loaded term. If you go back to pre-Socratic Greece, you might hear somebody speak of a tree having healing virtues or a pond having calming virtues. What they're talking about is this sort of innate power that emanates from the thing that one is able to sense, to experience in its presence. That's the real sort of virtue that De has. So it is this eminent quality that can be sensed and therefore does have characteristics that could be conceived of as powers. Though now in the modern Marvel universe, that makes it sound like it came out of a comic book, but not far from that same sort of idea that here's something that emanates from someone or something and can be understood as innate to the nature of who and or what it is. That's probably what I would best offer as Ella. You said you've got your mute problem fixed. If you can unmute, love to hear what you have to say.
Yes, Aman. This goes back a while because I had a mute issue, but yes, when I think it was Mark brought up that he saw some similarities in the Sermon on the Mount and the Taoist principles were discussing. And you said that the early translators were, I think, men of the cloth in some respect. And my take on it was they would have, you know, their Christian take on it on the Taoist readings. You can tell me if I'm wrong about that. But
Actually, oh, go right ahead.
yeah, but I was going to say, if, and you can clarify that, if that were the case, and perhaps the question could be answered anyway, even if it isn't, what are the similarities that that you see? And I would just add that the one thing that is most relatable to me, and this was discussed earlier by Shikan and others, is the idea of nature. And you know, so yeah, I don't know if that comes up later in the Tao or if it's something discussed earlier. I didn't attend all the meetings, but you know, that sort of aligns me with the universal more than, you know, although it's good wisdom what we're discussing, to not overreact to things and so forth, and to keep that Taoist mindfulness, which is difficult to do. But I was just wondering when the nature aspect of the Tao will come in, and are there any parallels with Christianity? Because I probably would have thought about the Sermon on the Mount myself. I'll leave it there.
I would, thank you, Ella. I would definitely say there are some parallels, and I don't, first of all, you were saying that the earlier translators, the earliest translators, the Jesuit priest in China, were looking to translate the Bible into Chinese, and while hunting around for some word that would fit, you know, in the beginning was the logos, the word, they decided on the Tao because it was a term loaded with the same sort of connotational weight as the term logos, and they thought it would translate very directly. And so that sort of, I loathe to say cultural appropriation, but call a spade a garden tool, was in play from the get-go. Later, when we get later interpreters, they weren't necessarily men of the cloth, but they were, you know, aristocratic, good Christian men who were educated in that sort of, you know, Christ Church college, Harvard, seminary settings. That has ebbed quite a bit over time, but the similarities exist even independent of that, enough that you can probably find a lot of Christian thinkers who will, while they may poo-poo other religions from the East, are somewhat reluctant to really go after Taoism because they see so much similarity. I too can see the similarity, but I am very interested in the distinctions, because Christianity would have a very hard time with the idea that the Lord treats all like straw dogs, or that benevolence isn't a feature in the universe. The universe simply is, and it is indifferent to your human machinations and wishes and desires. Those are some distinctions that I think are pretty interesting and relevant. Yeah, I'll let somebody else tackle this, and I'm gonna try and stay on about 8 more minutes. I'm in overtime now, so I'm gonna give Nick and Madeline the final words unless anybody's got anything that's just pressing, but hopefully that answered some of your questions, Ella. Nick, go right ahead.
Yeah, thanks. I just want to comment on Mark's question on this, the meaning of the, whether the ancient meaning is different from the present meaning, and how do we understand it in the Tao Te Ching? Because it's a key word. Etymologically speaking, I don't get a sense it's related to power. De actually is going back to the very beginning of the creation of this letter, this word, character. It's composed by 2 parts, the left and right, and the left part just means to follow, and the right part means straight, being straight, being straight. It's just like a straight, not crooked, straight. And then straight on the outside word, and also there is a heart in that composition. So it has been interpreted as following the Tao, right? So the character itself says you follow a standard, being strict, and that standard is Tao. In the ancient time, it also has the meaning of elevation, to rise up. So of course you follow the Tao, you elevate yourself, become sage, I guess, eventually. So in that sense, it doesn't have a direct connection to powerful. However, obviously there's a lot of narrative, a lot of talking about being virtuous, having the Tao because you follow the, having the De because you follow the Tao, therefore you become powerful even if you are submissive in appearance. So I guess that's how I would interpret it.
I appreciate that, Nick, and I think that's a great etymological breakdown of the word "the." Madeline, last word goes to you.
Thanks, Aman. Well, this has been an exciting evening. Thank you, Ella. I loved your question. I have been trying to think of ways to explain Taoism in terms of Western metaphysics, because they really don't map that well. And I think that's where we all tend to, well, we like sheep go astray. And so when we think of like, okay, the Tao is nature, in Western metaphysical terms, there is still a God that lies behind nature, that is a creator God, and nature is a created thing by some separate entity. And we can only hope to reach the realm of that entity someday. Taoism is more like an immanent world. In other words, the Tao is present all the time. It is here in the world, it is the world, and because we're in the world, the only way we can ever know the Tao is here, is like right now here in our lives. And so it would be more comparable, De would be an inner integrity that's it would be like the universal law. So something that would be applied across all standards, or like a categorical imperative, but not even that prescriptive. It's more like an inner integrity. And the Tao might be something more like the thing in itself that is beyond all the objects, all of our perceptions. Sorry, I'm having trouble switching modes of language. That lies behind all of the appearances, and that we can't know it. The only way that we can know it is through the appearances. But it doesn't come with a set of moral prescriptions that basically Kant's Christian philosophy came with. Although on the metaphysical level, it's very similar in that way.
I could not have said it better myself. Thank you, Madeline. Ella, I'll go ahead and give you a response, and then I'm going to need to go, and that means I'll have to shut down the meet. But go right ahead, Ella.
Yeah, just quickly, I mean, in general, that's all probably the case. We are looking, Christianity would have God beyond nature, and want that contact beyond nature, whatever you might deem that as being. In Christianity, in Judaism, there is a creator God. There are other gods. I mean, even in Kierkegaard, philosopher talks about God being in every point, at every point in space and time. There are, yeah, I don't think you look at Alfred North Whitehead. Spinoza has God enfolded into nature. It's deterministic and without freedom, but God is a part of nature. God is nature, in fact. You have Alfred North Whitehead, where God is in everything because it's on a physics atomic level. So because he's post-Einsteinian in his awareness, and God is everywhere and in everything in the universe. So I don't think it is, I don't think it is as oppositional, Buddhism and Christianity, depending on how you look at it and which perspective you view it in. There are some differences, to be sure. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you, Ella, and thank you, everybody. This was a great job powering through what was a really unusual evening. Started off with a little too much excitement over there in Taiwan. I look forward to seeing everybody in 2 weeks. I am traveling. I appreciate all the feedback and all the insights. Keep them coming. Do your homework. I'll look forward to seeing you guys in 2 weeks. Have a great evening, all. Ha hala. Mamanzo.
Thanks, Aman. Good night.
Take care. Good night.
Thank
Happy
you.
Thanks,
trails.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.